The rhythmic hum of the ship's engines had become as familiar to me as my own heartbeat. As I stood on the deck of the U.S. Navy vessel, the vast expanse of the Indian Ocean stretched out before me, a dark canvas painted with starlight. It was the late 1990s, and I had been serving as a petty officer for just over 3 years. The journey that brought me here was one of determination and a lifelong fascination with the sea. From my earliest memories growing up in a coastal town, the ocean had always called to me. Its mysteries, its power, and its hidden depths filled my imagination with wonder and a touch of fear. When I enlisted in the Navy, it felt like answering a summons I'd been hearing my entire life. The rigorous training and discipline required to become a petty officer had been challenging, but every drop of sweat and every sleepless night had been worth it to earn my place on this ship. Our current deployment had us patrolling a section of the Indian Ocean that seemed to stretch on forever. Days blended into nights, and the monotony of our routines was broken only by the occasional drill or the rare sight of another vessel on the horizon. Yet, even in the seeming emptiness of our surroundings, I never lost my sense of awe at the power and majesty of the ocean. That night, as I began my watch duty alongside 2 of my fellow crew members, the air was thick with an unusual stillness. The typically choppy waters were unnaturally calm, creating an almost mirror-like surface that reflected the star-studded sky above. It was the kind of night that invited conversation, a chance to share stories and pass the time. "You ever wonder what's really down there?" Johnson, one of my watchmates, asked as he gestured towards the inky blackness beyond the ship's railings. "I mean, they say we know more about the surface of the moon than the bottom of the ocean." I chuckled, recalling the countless documentaries and books I'd devoured on the subject. "Oh, I've wondered. There are some pretty wild theories out there about what might be lurking in the depths." Our other companion, Rodriguez, scoffed. "Don't tell me you believe in sea monsters, petty officer. Next thing you know, you'll be telling us the Loch Ness Monster vacations in the Indian Ocean." We all shared a laugh at that, but I couldn't help but feel a small shiver run down my spine. The ocean had always been a source of legends and myths, stories of creatures so enormous and terrifying that they defied belief. Part of me, the rational, trained naval officer, dismissed these tales as nothing more than folklore. But another part, the wide-eyed kid who'd grown up with his nose buried in books about marine life and unexplained phenomena, couldn't help but wonder. "You know," I said, leaning against the railing and gazing out at the tranquil waters, "there was this story I read once about a group of fishermen off the coast of Australia. Back in 1918, they claimed to have seen a shark so big it made great whites look like guppies. Supposedly, it attacked their lobster pots, left them scared out of their wits." Johnson leaned in, intrigued. "No kidding. What happened?" I shrugged. "Nothing much. Some expert investigated, but without concrete proof, it all got written off as an exaggeration. Still, makes you think, doesn't it, about what could be out there, just beyond our sight." As we continued our watch, swapping more stories of sea legends and maritime mysteries, I couldn't shake the feeling that the ocean around us was listening. It was an irrational thought, I knew, but something about the unnatural calm of the night seemed to amplify every creak of the ship, every lap of water against the hull. Little did I know that this quiet night was merely the prelude to an encounter that would challenge everything I thought I knew about the world beneath the waves. As we went about our duties, checking instruments and scanning the horizon, none of us could have predicted the terror that lurked just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The calm waters around us held no hint of the storm that was about to break, a storm that would leave an indelible mark on my life and forever change my perception of the vast, mysterious realm we called the sea. The first sign that something was amiss came not from our eyes, but from our ears. The usual symphony of ocean sounds, the lapping of waves against the hull, the distant calls of seabirds, had fallen silent. It was as if the entire sea was holding its breath. Johnson was the first to notice, cocking his head to one side with a puzzled expression. "You hear that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Rodriguez and I exchanged glances before straining our ears. The silence was deafening, broken only by the low hum of the ship's engines. It was unnatural, eerie in a way that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "Maybe it's just a lull," Rodriguez suggested, but the uncertainty in his voice betrayed his own unease. I was about to respond when a flashing light on the nearby console caught my attention. The ship's sonar was picking up something unusual, a massive object moving beneath the surface. As I moved to investigate, the silent night exploded into chaos. A dorsal fin, impossibly large, broke the surface of the water. My mind struggled to process what my eyes were seeing. It was at least 10 feet tall, cutting through the water with terrifying speed and purpose. Time seemed to slow as the realization hit me. We were witnessing something that shouldn't exist. "Dear God," Johnson breathed, his face pale in the moonlight. "What is that thing?" Before any of us could respond, the water erupted in a frenzy of splashing and high-pitched squeals. A pod of dolphins, clearly in distress, burst to the surface, their sleek bodies arsing through the air in desperate attempts to escape. And then we saw it. A massive shape, dark and ominous, rising from the depths. The shark, if you could call something so monstrous by such a mundane name, was beyond anything I had ever imagined. Its girth alone was wider than some smaller fishing boats I'd seen. As it rolled to attack the fleeing dolphins, I caught a glimpse of rows upon rows of teeth, each one the size of a man's hand. "Sound the alarm," I shouted, snapping out of my stupor. Rodriguez fumbled for the controls while Johnson and I stood transfixed, unable to tear our eyes away from the brutal scene unfolding before us. The massive predator moved with a speed that belied its size, snatching dolphins from the air with terrible precision. The water churned red, and the sounds of the massacre would haunt my dreams for years to come. As quickly as it had begun, it was over. The giant shark submerged, leaving behind only ripples and a deathly silence. Klaxons blared across the ship as crew members rushed to their stations. The calm night had transformed into a flurry of activity and confusion. Our commanding officer arrived on deck, his face a mask of disbelief as we recounted what we had witnessed. "Are you certain of what you saw?" he demanded, his eyes scanning the now calm waters as if expecting the creature to reappear at any moment. "Sir," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt, "I know it sounds impossible, but we all saw it. That shark, it had to be at least 80 feet long, maybe more." The captain's brow furrowed as he processed this information. "Johnson, check the sonar logs. I want to know exactly what our instruments picked up." As Johnson hurried to comply, I couldn't shake the image of that enormous fin slicing through the water. It was like something out of a nightmare, a creature that belonged to the age of dinosaurs, not our modern world. How could something so large have remained hidden for so long? The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Marine biologists and shark experts were contacted, their skepticism palpable even over the satellite phone. They spoke of misidentification, of the tricks low light and adrenaline could play on the human mind. But I knew what I had seen, what we had all seen. "With all due respect, sir," I overheard our captain saying to one expert, "these are trained naval personnel. They know the difference between a whale and a shark." As dawn broke, casting a pale light over the ocean, I found myself standing at the same spot where our night had turned into a waking nightmare. The water showed no signs of the carnage we had witnessed, no evidence of the enormous predator that had turned our world upside down. Rodriguez joined me at the railing, his usual jovial demeanor subdued. "You think anyone's going to believe us?" he asked quietly. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I don't know. But I know what we saw. That wasn't any ordinary shark." As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting sparkles across the gentle waves, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had stumbled upon something profound. Something that, if proven true, would rewrite our understanding of marine life and evolution. But as the experts began to arrive, their faces etched with skepticism, I realized that our battle was just beginning. We hadn't just seen a monster from the deep. We had opened a Pandora's box of scientific controversy and public fascination that would follow us long after we left these waters behind. In the days following our encounter with the giant shark, I found myself unable to shake the image of that massive dorsal fin cutting through the water. The skepticism we faced from the scientific community only fueled my determination to understand what we had witnessed. During my off-duty hours, I buried myself in research, scouring every available resource for similar accounts throughout history. It was during one of these late-night research sessions that I stumbled upon the name James Barlow. A respected ocean expert from the early 20th century, Barlow had investigated reports of a gigantic shark off the coast of Port Stephens, Australia, in 1918. The parallels to our own experience were uncanny, and I felt a surge of excitement as I delved deeper into his findings. Barlow's investigation had been triggered by a group of lobster fishermen who claimed their traps had been attacked by an enormous white shark. As I read through the dusty digital archives, the fishermen's accounts leaped off the screen, their fear palpable even across the decades. They described a creature of such immense size that it dwarfed their boats, its massive jaws capable of crushing their sturdy lobster pots like tinfoil. One fisherman's testimony particularly stood out. It was like the sea itself had grown teeth, he had told Barlow. We've seen our share of great whites, but this was something else entirely. None of us wanted to go back out there after that day. Barlow's meticulous notes revealed his initial skepticism, but as he gathered more evidence and eyewitness accounts, his tone shifted. He began to entertain the possibility that what the fishermen had encountered was not just an unusually large great white, but potentially a living specimen of the prehistoric megalodon, a shark species long thought extinct. As I pored over Barlow's findings, I couldn't help but draw parallels to our own situation. The scientific community had dismissed the Port Stephens incident as mass hysteria or exaggeration, just as they were now questioning our sanity and judgment. But Barlow had persisted, driven by the conviction that there was more to the story than mere tall tales. My research took an unexpected turn when I uncovered another intriguing account, this one from 1928. Nathaniel Hawkins, a prolific American Western novelist, had reported an encounter with a massive shark while deep-sea fishing off Rangiroa Atoll in Tahiti. Hawkins was known for his vivid imagination, but the details of his account were too specific, too similar to what we had seen, to be easily dismissed. According to Hawkins' journal, which I found excerpted in an old maritime magazine, he had been aboard his fishing vessel when he spotted a shark he estimated to be between 40 and 50 feet long. It was as if a legend had come to life before my very eyes. Hawkins had written, "The great beast moved with a grace that belied its enormous size, its dark form casting a shadow that seemed to swallow the sun." What lent even more credibility to Hawkins' account was the presence of his 13-year-old son, Caleb. 2 days after his initial sighting, the skeptical Caleb had convinced his father to return to the same spot. There, to young Caleb's astonishment, they both witnessed the giant shark again, this time as it attacked a pod of dolphins, a scene chillingly similar to what we had observed in the Indian Ocean decades later. The Hawkins encounter, like ours, had been met with disbelief by the scientific community. But the novelist had been undeterred, using his way with words to vividly describe what he and his son had seen. It was not just a fish, he wrote, but a living fossil, a creature that time had forgotten, but the ocean remembered. As I connected these historical dots, a pattern began to emerge. From the Australian coast in 1918 to the waters of Tahiti in 1928, and now to our own sighting in the Indian Ocean, there seemed to be a trail of encounters spanning nearly a century. Each report was separated by decades and thousands of miles, yet they all described a creature of similar impossible proportions. The more I uncovered, the more convinced I became that what we had seen was not an isolated incident or a trick of the light. These historical accounts, combined with our own experience, painted a picture of a creature that had somehow managed to survive, hidden in the vast depths of the world's oceans, occasionally surfacing to remind humanity of its existence. Yet questions remained. If such a massive predator still roamed the seas, why hadn't it been definitively documented? How could something so large evade detection in an age of advanced sonar and constant ocean exploration? The logical part of my mind struggled with these inconsistencies, even as the memory of that enormous fin remained seared into my consciousness. As I sat in the ship's library, surrounded by stacks of books and printouts, I realized that our encounter had placed us at the center of a mystery that spanned generations. We were now part of a select group of witnesses, our experience echoing those of the traumatized Australian fisherman and the awestruck American novelist. Whether the world was ready to believe us or not, we had seen something extraordinary, something that challenged our understanding of the natural world. With a renewed sense of purpose, I gathered my notes and prepared to share my findings with my crewmates. Our giant shark sighting might have been dismissed by some as a momentary delusion, but I now had evidence that we were not alone in our experience. As I walked back to my quarters, the gentle rocking of the ship reminded me of the vast, mysterious ocean that surrounded us. An ocean that, I was becoming increasingly convinced, still held secrets beyond our wildest imaginations. As our ship cut through the waves of the Indian Ocean, I found myself standing at the railing once again, my eyes scanning the horizon. The weight of what we had witnessed, coupled with the historical accounts I had uncovered, sat heavily on my shoulders. The vastness of the ocean stretched out before me, a constant reminder of how little we truly knew about the world beneath the waves. My research into past sightings of giant sharks had left me with more questions than answers. The scientific community's steadfast skepticism clashed violently with the vivid memories of that night. The enormous dorsal fin, the chaos of the dolphin pod's desperate flight, the sheer impossibility of what we had seen. How could we reconcile these conflicting realities? I recalled the words of James Barlow, the ocean expert who had investigated the Port Stevens incident in 1918. In his final report, he had written, "The sea holds secrets that we, in our hubris, may never fully comprehend. To dismiss the unknown simply because it challenges our understanding is to turn our backs on the very essence of scientific inquiry." Those words resonated with me now more than ever. As we prepared to resume our regular duties, I noticed a change in the atmosphere among the crew. Those who had witnessed the giant shark moved with a new awareness, their eyes constantly drawn to the water's surface. Even those who hadn't seen it firsthand seemed affected, picking up on the tension that now permeated our daily routines. I found myself volunteering for more watch duties, driven by a mix of fascination and an irrational hope of catching another glimpse of the creature. The logical part of my mind knew the chances were astronomically slim, but I couldn't shake the feeling that our encounter had been more than just a random event. During one particularly long night watch, I struck up a conversation with Rodriguez, who had been there that fateful night. "Do you ever wonder," I asked, my voice low, "if we really saw what we think we saw?" Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment before responding. "I've tried to convince myself it was something else, a whale, a trick of the light, anything. But then I close my eyes, and I see that fin again, and I know, whatever it was real." His words echoed my own thoughts. The image of that massive shark had become a part of us, altering our perception of the world around us. Every shadow beneath the waves, every unexpected sound in the night, carried with it the possibility of another encounter. As our deployment neared its end, I found myself grappling with conflicting emotions. Part of me was relieved to be leaving these waters behind, to return to the safety and predictability of life on land. But another part, the part that had always been drawn to the mysteries of the ocean, was reluctant to leave. What if our sighting had been a once-in-a-lifetime event? What other secrets might the depths hold? In my final days aboard the ship, I compiled all of my research, the historical accounts, our own eyewitness reports, and the sonar data that had captured the size of the creature, into a comprehensive report. I knew that it might be dismissed or filed away, never to see the light of day, but I felt compelled to document everything we had experienced and discovered. As I wrote the concluding paragraphs of my report, I found myself reflecting on the broader implications of our encounter. If a creature as large as a megalodon could have survived undetected for millions of years, what did that say about our understanding of the oceans? How many other prehistoric species might still exist in the unexplored abysses of our planet? The night before we were set to return to port, I stood on the deck one last time, gazing out at the moonlit waters. The ocean seemed different now, charged with a potential for wonder and terror that I had never fully appreciated before. I thought of all the sailors and fishermen throughout history who had returned from sea with tales of monsters and leviathans, only to be dismissed as superstitious or delusional. How many of them, I wondered, had experiences similar to ours? As the first light of dawn began to paint the horizon, I made a decision. Our encounter with the giant shark, whether it was truly a living megalodon or some other unknown species, was not the end of a story, but the beginning. I would continue my research, continue to seek out other accounts and evidence. The ocean, vast and mysterious, still held secrets waiting to be uncovered. Stepping away from the railing, I took one last look at the seemingly peaceful waters. Somewhere out there, beneath the waves, swam a creature that defied explanation, a living testament to the ocean's capacity to surprise and terrify us. As we began our journey back to shore, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was not goodbye, but merely the closing of one chapter in a much larger story. The experience had changed me, as I suspected had changed all of us who witnessed it. We had gazed into the abyss, and something ancient and powerful had gazed back. As we sailed towards home, leaving behind the site of our incredible encounter, I knew that a part of me would always remain here, scanning the horizon, waiting for that impossible fin to break the surface once more.